The grand ballroom of Buckingham Palace buzzed with anticipation as world leaders gathered for the state dinner. Among the distinguished guests, President Donald Trump stood out in his signature navy suit, surveying the opulent surroundings with keen interest. The evening had been meticulously planned by palace staff, but nobody could have predicted what would happen next. Prince William arrived fashionably late, as royal protocol demanded. His presence immediately commanded attention as he moved gracefully through the crowd, greeting dignitaries with practiced ease. The Prince of Wales had attended countless such events, but tonight felt different. There was an electric energy in the air, perhaps because this was one of the most politically charged gatherings in recent memory. As cameras flashed and reporters positioned themselves strategically around the room, Trump noticed the prince making his rounds. The president had always been fascinated by the British royal family, often expressing admiration for their traditions and pageantry. He watched as William exchanged pleasantries with various ambassadors and prime ministers, waiting for the right moment to approach. The two men's paths finally crossed near the ornate fireplace that dominated the eastern wall of the ballroom. Secret Service agents and royal protection officers maintained a respectful distance, their trained eyes scanning every movement. The moment seemed almost choreographed, though it was entirely spontaneous. Trump extended his hand first, a gesture that would soon be analyzed frame by frame across social media platforms worldwide. His grip was firm and confident, exactly what body language experts had come to expect from the former businessman turned politician. Prince William responded with equal poise, his royal training evident in the way he maintained perfect posture while engaging in the handshake. The exchange lasted approximately 12 seconds, though it felt much longer to the dozens of photographers capturing every angle. Neither man spoke initially, their eyes locked in what appeared to be mutual respect mixed with curiosity. The president's characteristic smile spread across his face, while William maintained his more reserved but warm expression. What made this particular handshake extraordinary was not just the meeting of two powerful figures, but the timing. The world was watching closely as diplomatic relations between the United States and the United Kingdom navigated complex political waters. Every gesture, every facial expression would be scrutinized for hidden meanings and diplomatic signals. The handshake concluded with both men stepping back slightly, Trump placing his left hand briefly on William's shoulder in a gesture of camaraderie. The prince nodded graciously, a subtle acknowledgement that spoke volumes about his diplomatic training. Neither realized that this simple greeting would soon dominate headlines across the globe. Palace staff continued their duties around them, serving champagne and canapes to the gathered dignitaries. The string quartet played softly in the background, their classical melodies providing an elegant soundtrack to the evening's proceedings. Other guests continued their conversations, many unaware that they had just witnessed what would become one of the most talked-about moments of the entire event. As the two men parted ways to continue mingling with other guests, photographers furiously reviewed their shots, knowing they had captured something special. The combination of Trump's bold personality and William's refined royal presence created a visual narrative that would resonate far beyond the palace walls. The evening continued with formal dinner service, but the handshake had already set the tone for what would become a viral sensation. Social media managers from news organizations around the world began preparing their posts, recognizing the potential impact of the images they had just received from their photographers on the ground. Within the palace walls, staff members whispered among themselves about the encounter. Many had worked royal events for years, but few had witnessed such intense media focus on a single handshake. The palace's social media team prepared for what they knew would be an unprecedented response from the public. Trump returned to his conversations with other world leaders, but his mind kept returning to the brief encounter with the prince. He had always understood the power of image and symbolism, and he sensed that something significant had just occurred. The president made mental notes about William's demeanor and presence, impressed by the younger man's composure under the intense scrutiny. Prince William, meanwhile, continued his royal duties with characteristic grace. He had been trained from childhood to handle such situations with aplomb, never showing whether an encounter had made any particular impression on him. However, those close to him noted a slight sparkle in his eyes that suggested he too recognized the significance of the moment. As the formal dinner concluded and guests began to depart, neither Trump nor William could have imagined that their brief handshake would soon spark thousands of discussions, debates, and analyses across every corner of the internet. The stage was set for a global conversation that would reveal as much about public perception and media culture as it did about the two men themselves. The first photograph appeared on Twitter just 43 minutes after the handshake occurred. A royal correspondent for a major British newspaper had uploaded the image with a simple caption, but the response was immediate and overwhelming. Within the first hour, the post had received over 10,000 likes and hundreds of retweets, each sharing adding their own commentary to the mix. Sarah Martinez, a political blogger from California, was among the first to spot the trending image. She had been following the state dinner coverage while working late in her home office, refreshing her social media feeds for any noteworthy developments. When the handshake photo appeared on her timeline, she immediately recognized its potential impact. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she crafted what would become one of the most shared analysis threads of the evening. Meanwhile, in London, James Fletcher, a body language expert who had built a following analyzing political interactions, was already preparing his breakdown of the encounter. He had recorded the live stream of the event and was methodically reviewing the footage frame by frame. What he discovered would fuel countless discussions about power dynamics, cultural differences, and diplomatic protocols. The photograph showed Trump and William at the exact moment their hands met, with both men maintaining direct eye contact. The president's signature confident stance was evident, his feet planted firmly and shoulders squared toward the prince. William appeared equally poised, his royal training evident in his perfect posture and measured expression. The lighting in the ballroom cast both figures in a golden glow, creating an almost cinematic quality to the image. Television news networks began incorporating the image into their coverage within 2 hours of its first appearance online. CNN's evening anchor dedicated a full segment to analyzing the handshake, bringing in royal experts and political commentators to dissect every aspect of the encounter. Fox News followed suit, though their interpretation took on a notably different tone, praising Trump's confident approach to engaging with international royalty. Across the Atlantic, British media outlets were having their own field day with the story. The BBC's royal correspondent provided measured analysis, focusing on the diplomatic significance of the meeting and its potential implications for US-UK relations. Tabloid newspapers, however, took a more sensationalized approach, with headlines speculating about everything from body language to clothing choices. Social media platforms experienced unprecedented engagement around the hashtag that organically emerged, Trump-William handshake. Instagram influencers began creating their own interpretations of the moment, with some recreating the handshake pose and others offering humorous takes on what the two men might have been thinking. TikTok users, true to form, created elaborate parodies and memes that spread like wildfire among younger demographics. Professional photographers who had been present at the event found themselves fielding calls from news organizations around the world, all seeking to license their images of the historic handshake. Getty Images reported that photos from the encounter were among their most downloaded political images of the year within just 12 hours of the event. The international response was equally fascinating. French media outlets provided their own cultural perspective on the encounter, with several publications noting the contrast between American directness and British reserve. German newspapers focused on the diplomatic implications, while Italian publications seemed particularly interested in the fashion and styling choices of both men during the encounter. Political opponents and supporters of both figures found ammunition in the images. Trump supporters praised his confident demeanor and ability to command respect on the international stage. Critics, however, analyzed his body language for signs of overreach or inappropriate behavior. Similarly, those who followed the royal family closely debated whether William's response demonstrated appropriate diplomatic warmth or excessive friendliness toward a controversial political figure. Academic institutions began incorporating the handshake into their curricula almost immediately. Communication professors used the images to illustrate concepts of nonverbal communication and cross-cultural interaction. Political science departments scheduled emergency seminars to discuss the diplomatic implications of the encounter and its broader significance for international relations. The palace's official, social media accounts remained characteristically restrained, posting only the standard diplomatic language about the successful state dinner and the importance of continued cooperation between the two nations. This measured response only fueled more speculation about the royal family's true feelings about the encounter. Trump's social media team, however, took a more proactive approach. They began strategically sharing and retweeting positive analyses of the president's performance during the handshake, highlighting comments that praised his diplomatic skills and international presence. The president himself remained uncharacteristically quiet on social media for several hours, unusual behavior that only intensified public interest in his perspective on the encounter. Celebrity commentators and talk show hosts began incorporating the handshake into their monologues and social media content. Late-night television shows prepared elaborate sketches recreating the moment, while daytime talk shows scheduled segments featuring body language, experts and royal historians to provide their professional insights. The viral nature of the moment demonstrated the power of visual storytelling in the digital age. A single photograph had managed to capture global attention in ways that lengthy diplomatic statements or policy announcements rarely achieved. The handshake had become a cultural phenomenon, transcending its original context to become a symbol that different groups could interpret according to their own perspectives and biases. By the end of the first day, major news aggregators reported that the handshake had generated more online engagement than any other political story of the week. The momentum showed no signs of slowing down, as international media outlets continued to provide their own unique takes on what many were already calling the handshake seen around the world. Within 24 hours of the handshake, social media platforms were experiencing what analysts would later call a perfect storm of viral content. Twitter reported that the hashtag #TrumpWilliam handshake had been used in over 2 million tweets, making it the top trending topic globally for 36 consecutive hours. The platform's algorithms struggled to keep up with the sheer volume of content being generated every minute. Facebook groups dedicated to analyzing the encounter sprouted up organically across different countries and languages. A group called Handshake Analysis Experts gained 50,000 members in its first day, with users posting slow-motion videos, enhanced photographs, and detailed frame-by-frame breakdowns of the encounter. Another group, Royal Watchers United, saw similar explosive growth as members debated the diplomatic implications of William's response to Trump's approach. Instagram witnessed an unprecedented surge in handshake-related content. Professional photographers shared behind-the-scenes footage from the event, while amateur creators attempted to recreate the exact positioning and timing of the famous greeting. A fitness influencer named Marcus Thompson gained 200,000 new followers after posting a workout routine that incorporated power handshake techniques, claiming to teach his audience how to project the same confidence that Trump displayed during the encounter. TikTok users, known for their creativity and humor, took the phenomenon to entirely new levels. A teenager from Ohio created a 15-second video recreating the handshake with her younger brother, perfectly mimicking Trump's confident stride and William's measured response. The video garnered 12 million views in 3 days and spawned thousands of similar recreations across the platform. Professional meme creators found themselves with an endless supply of material. The contrast between Trump's bold American style and William's refined British demeanor provided perfect fodder for countless humorous interpretations. Some memes focused on imagined dialogue between the two men, while others incorporated popular culture references to create elaborate scenarios around the handshake. YouTube content creators mobilized their audiences with unprecedented speed. A channel called Body Language Decoded published a 28-minute analysis video that accumulated 3 million views within 48 hours. The creator, Dr. Amanda Chen, a former FBI behavioral analyst, broke down every micro-expression and gesture visible in the available footage, providing insights that fueled even more discussion across other platforms. International social media platforms joined the conversation as well. Weibo, China's largest social networking site, saw millions of posts discussing the cultural differences highlighted by the handshake. Users debated American versus British social customs, with many expressing fascination at the level of global attention such a simple gesture could generate. Russian social media platform VKontakte featured similar discussions, though with notably different political undertones. celebrity responses began pouring in from unexpected quarters. Hollywood actors, musicians, and athletes all weighed in with their interpretations of the moment. Some praised both men for their diplomatic grace, while others used the opportunity to make broader political statements. A famous comedian's tweet suggesting that the handshake should be taught in business schools as an example of perfect networking technique received over 500,000 likes. Political commentators found themselves scrambling to provide fresh takes on the story as public appetite for analysis seemed insatiable. Cable news networks began featuring handshake experts, cultural anthropologists, and international relations specialists, all offering their unique perspectives on what the encounter revealed about broader geopolitical relationships. The viral nature of the content created unexpected opportunities for educational content. History teachers began using the handshake as a starting point for discussions about diplomacy throughout the ages. Communication professors incorporated the footage into their lessons about nonverbal communication and cultural sensitivity. Even elementary school teachers found ways to use the story to teach children about different countries and customs. Amateur detectives on Reddit began conducting their own investigations into the encounter, analyzing everything from the men's clothing choices to the positioning of security personnel in the background. These detailed analyses, while often far-fetched, demonstrated the public's hunger for any new angle or insight into the famous moment. The global nature of the response revealed fascinating cultural differences in interpretation. Middle Eastern social media users focused primarily on the diplomatic significance of the encounter, while Scandinavian platforms emphasized the body language and communication aspects. South American users seemed particularly interested in the fashion and style elements, creating detailed breakdowns of both men's sartorial choices. Corporate social media teams recognized the marketing potential and began creating content that cleverly incorporated handshake themes into their brand messaging. A major beverage company created an advertisement featuring people from different cultures sharing drinks and handshakes, while a telecommunications company launched a campaign about connecting people across distances and differences. The phenomenon also sparked discussions about the nature of viral content itself. Media researchers began studying the handshake as a case study in how simple moments can capture global attention in the digital age. Several universities announced research projects dedicated to understanding the sociological and technological factors that contributed to the story's unprecedented reach. Dating apps reported an unusual trend of users incorporating handshake references into their profiles, with some claiming to offer Trump-level confidence or William-style grace in their biographical descriptions. The cultural impact had extended beyond politics and diplomacy into everyday social interactions. Educational institutions found themselves fielding requests from students wanting to write papers and conduct research projects about the handshake phenomenon. Libraries reported increased interest in books about body language, diplomacy, and viral media, as curious individuals sought to better understand the mechanisms behind the story's explosive popularity. By the end of the second day, social media analytics companies estimated that content related to the handshake had generated over 50 million individual engagements across all major platforms. The numbers continued to climb as international audiences in different time zones discovered and contributed to the ongoing conversation, ensuring that the phenomenon maintained its momentum far longer than typical viral content. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, a leading expert in international diplomacy at Oxford University, received calls from 12 different news organizations within 6 hours of the handshake footage going viral. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since the story broke, with journalists from around the world seeking her professional analysis of what many were calling the most scrutinized greeting in modern political history. From her book-lined office overlooking the Thames, Dr. Hartwell carefully reviewed the available footage for the 15th time that morning. As someone who had spent 30 years studying diplomatic protocols and cross-cultural communication, she understood that this moment represented far more than a simple handshake between two powerful men. Every gesture, every micro-expression carried potential significance that could influence international relations for months to come. Meanwhile, in New York, renowned body language expert Dr. Michael Rodriguez was preparing for what would become the most watched segment of his career. The former FBI behavioral analyst had been studying the footage with the same intensity he once brought to criminal investigations. His preliminary findings suggested layers of complexity that most casual observers had completely missed. The BBC's royal correspondent, Victoria Sterling, found herself at the center of a media frenzy. Having covered the royal family for over 15 years, she had witnessed countless diplomatic encounters, but none had generated this level of global fascination. Her phone buzzed constantly with interview requests from international media outlets, all seeking her insider perspective on Prince William's demeanor and response during the encounter. Professional photographers who had captured the moment were being contacted by art galleries and museums interested in acquiring prints for their collections. Several institutions were already discussing the historical significance of the images and their potential value as documentation of early 21st century diplomacy. The Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., had quietly reached out to express interest in obtaining high-resolution copies for their archives. Cultural anthropologist Professor Sarah Kim at Stanford University was inundated with requests from her graduate students who wanted to write their dissertations about the handshake phenomenon. The encounter had provided a perfect real-time case study of how cultural symbols spread and evolve in the digital age. Professor Kim recognized that this moment would likely be referenced in academic papers for decades to come. International etiquette expert Lady Catherine Pemberton, who had trained diplomats and business leaders for over 20 years, offered her analysis to eager media outlets. From her London office, she explained the subtle nuances of protocol that most observers had overlooked. The angle of Trump's approach, the duration of eye contact, and William's measured response all contained clues about the relationship dynamics between the two nations. Former ambassadors and career diplomats weighed in with their perspectives on major news networks. Ambassador Robert Chen, who had served in both London and Washington during his distinguished career, appeared on CNN to discuss how such encounters could influence bilateral relationships. His analysis focused on the symbolic importance of the setting and the broader context of US-UK diplomatic relations. Corporate communication consultants saw enormous opportunity in the public's fascination with the handshake. Executive coaching firms began offering specialized training sessions on power handshakes and diplomatic presence, using footage from the Trump-William encounter as their primary teaching tool. Several Fortune 500 companies quietly inquired about bringing in handshake experts to train their leadership teams. Psychology professors across multiple universities began incorporating the viral moment into their curricula. The encounter provided perfect material for discussions about first impressions, nonverbal communication, and the psychology of power dynamics. Student interest was unprecedented, with several professors reporting standing room-only attendance at lectures that featured handshake analysis. International relations think tanks published lengthy reports, analyzing every aspect of the encounter. The Brookings Institution released a 10-page analysis within 72 hours, while the Council on Foreign Relations scheduled an emergency symposium to discuss the broader implications of the viral phenomenon for modern diplomacy. Mental health professionals noted an interesting trend in their practices. Several patients had begun bringing up the handshake during therapy sessions, using it as a reference point for discussions about confidence, social anxiety, and interpersonal relationships. The moment had apparently resonated with people on a deeply personal level. Beyond its political significance, celebrity image consultants found themselves fielding unusual requests from clients wanting to learn how to project the same level of confidence that Trump displayed during the encounter, or the composed grace that William demonstrated. Hollywood agents began incorporating handshake coaching into their client development programs, recognizing the importance of such skills in red carpet and interview situations. Security experts who had worked diplomatic events for decades offered their perspectives on the encounter. They noted the positioning of protection details, the sightlines maintained by various security teams, and the split-second decisions that allowed the handshake to occur naturally while maintaining appropriate safety protocols for both men. Fashion and style experts joined the conversation, analyzing everything from Trump's tie selection to William's suit tailoring. Several major fashion magazines published detailed breakdowns of both men's sartorial choices, with some suggesting that their clothing selections had been carefully chosen to project specific images during the encounter. Speech. Therapists and communication coaches noted interesting patterns in how different media personalities discuss the handshake. The vocabulary choices, emphasis patterns, and descriptive language used by various commentators revealed cultural biases and personal perspectives that provided additional layers of analysis for those studying the phenomenon business. School professors began using the handshake as a case study in crisis communication and reputation management. They examined how both Trump's team and the royal family's communication staff handled the viral moment, analyzing their social media strategies and public relations approaches. As the story continued to dominate global headlines, the overwhelming consensus among experts was that the encounter represented a perfect storm of factors that created the ideal conditions for viral content. The combination of recognizable figures, clear visual storytelling, cultural contrasts, and impeccable timing had produced a moment that transcended its original diplomatic context to become a global cultural phenomenon. Within a week of the handshake, 3 major publishers had reached out to various experts about writing books analyzing the encounter and its broader implications for modern communication, diplomacy, and viral culture. The moment had clearly established itself as more than a fleeting internet sensation. Newsrooms across 6 continents were experiencing what veteran journalists would later describe as organized chaos. The handshake between Trump and Prince William had created an unprecedented demand for coverage that stretched resources and challenged editorial priorities at news organizations worldwide. Assignment desks scrambled to deploy reporters, photographers, and analysts to provide fresh angles on a story that seemed to have infinite layers of complexity. The New York Times' London bureau found itself at the epicenter of the media storm. Foreign correspondent Jennifer Walsh had been covering the state dinner as a routine diplomatic story, but within hours of the handshake footage surfacing, her article had become the most read piece on the newspaper's website. The editorial team quickly assigned 3 additional reporters to provide ongoing coverage, recognizing that reader appetite for the story showed no signs of diminishing. CNN International faced unique challenges as they attempted to provide balanced coverage across their global audience. The network's London, New York, and Atlanta newsrooms collaborated on round-the-clock coverage that had to satisfy American viewers interested in Trump's diplomatic performance. British audiences focused on royal protocol, and international viewers seeking broader geopolitical analysis. Their live coverage attracted the highest ratings for a non-breaking news event in over 2 years. The BBC's coverage took on particular significance given their unique position as both a British institution and a global news service. Their royal correspondents worked alongside political analysts to provide what many considered the most authoritative coverage of the encounter. The network's diplomatic editor appeared on television for 18 consecutive hours, fielding questions from anchors, viewers, and international colleagues seeking expert insight. Sky News implemented an innovative approach by creating dedicated handshake coverage streams on their digital platforms. Their social media team tracked viral content in real time, incorporating trending memes and social media reactions into their traditional news coverage. The experiment proved so successful that several other networks began adopting similar strategies for future viral political moments. International wire services like Reuters and Associated Press found themselves in an unusual situation where their routine diplomatic coverage had become global front-page news. Their photographers' images were being licensed by hundreds of news organizations worldwide, while their written coverage provided the factual foundation for countless opinion pieces and analysis articles. Television networks in Germany, France, Italy, and Spain all provided extensive coverage, but each brought unique cultural perspectives to their analysis. German media focused heavily on the diplomatic protocols and international relations implications. French coverage emphasized the cultural clash between American directness and British reserve. Italian outlets seemed particularly fascinated by the visual drama and theatrical elements of the encounter. Japanese media outlets provided some of the most detailed analysis of the handshake's nonverbal elements, drawing upon their culture's sophisticated understanding of subtle communication through gesture and posture. NHK World's coverage included frame-by-frame analysis that revealed micro-expressions and body language details that Western media had overlooked. Australian news organizations found themselves in a unique position as fellow Commonwealth nations, providing coverage that bridged American and British perspectives. Their analysis often focused on the implications for Australia's relationships with both nations, while their commentary reflected the country's cultural connections to both American pop culture and British royal traditions. Middle Eastern news networks offered perspectives that differed significantly from Western coverage. Al Jazeera's analysis focused on the encounter as an example of Western diplomatic theater, while outlets in Saudi Arabia and the UAE examined how the viral moment might influence their own relationships with both Britain and America. Russian media coverage took on distinctly different tones depending on the outlet. State-controlled networks presented the handshake as evidence of Western diplomatic superficiality, while independent Russian journalists analyzed the encounter through the lens of international power dynamics in media manipulation. Chinese social media and traditional media provided fascinating perspectives that American and European audiences rarely encountered. Weibo discussions often focused on the cultural differences between Eastern and Western greeting customs, while state media outlets analyzed the encounter's implications for China's own diplomatic relationships with both nations. Indian news coverage emphasized the Commonwealth connections and colonial history that linked all three nations involved, the United States, Britain, and by extension India itself. Their analysis often incorporated broader discussions about post-colonial relationships and modern diplomatic protocols. African news outlets provided unique perspectives on the encounter, with many focusing on how such moments of Western diplomatic theater contrasted with their own experiences of international relations. South African media, in particular, drew parallels to their own complex relationship with both British royalty and American political leadership. Latin American coverage often emphasized the theatrical and entertainment aspects of the viral moment, with several outlets incorporating the handshake into broader discussions about political spectacle and media manipulation. Mexican television networks created elaborate analysis segments that became popular across Spanish-speaking social media platforms. The phenomenon created unprecedented collaboration between news organizations that typically competed with each other. International news exchanges facilitated sharing of footage, expert interviews, and cultural perspectives that enriched coverage across all participating networks. The handshake had essentially created a temporary, global newsroom focused on a single story. Editorial boards at major newspapers worldwide struggled with how much coverage to dedicate to what was essentially a brief social interaction. The Washington Post, The Guardian, Le Monde, and dozens of other publications found themselves balancing serious diplomatic analysis with acknowledgement of the story's viral entertainment value. Online news platforms experienced traffic surges that tested their technical infrastructure. BuzzFeed, Politico, and similar digital-first outlets created comprehensive coverage packages that combined traditional journalism with social media integration, memes, and interactive content that engaged younger audiences who might not typically consume political news. The global reach of the coverage revealed interesting patterns about news consumption in the digital age. Stories that began in British tabloids were being referenced by serious news organizations in Asia. Analysis pieces from American think tanks were being translated and republished in European magazines. The handshake had created a truly global conversation that transcended traditional media boundaries. By the end of the first week, media monitoring services estimated that the handshake had generated more international news coverage than many significant policy announcements or diplomatic agreements. The story had demonstrated the power of visual storytelling and viral phenomena to capture global attention in ways that traditional news events rarely achieved. 6 months after the handshake that captivated the world, its influence continued to ripple through multiple spheres of society in ways that neither Donald Trump nor Prince William could have anticipated. The encounter had evolved from a viral moment into a cultural touchstone that researchers, educators, and communicators referenced regularly in discussions about everything from diplomacy to digital media. Universities across the globe had incorporated the handshake into their academic curricula with remarkable consistency. Harvard Business School developed a case study titled "The Power of Nonverbal Communication in High-Stakes Encounters" that used the Trump-William handshake as its central example. Students analyzed the encounter from multiple angles, examining leadership presence, cultural sensitivity, and crisis communication strategies. The case study became so popular that it was adopted by over 50 business schools worldwide. Communication departments at major universities found that the handshake provided perfect material for examining how viral content spreads across different cultural contexts. Professor Maria Gonzalez at Columbia University published a paper titled Digital Diplomacy in the Age of Viral Media that became one of the most cited academic articles of the year. Her research traced how the handshake's interpretation varied across different countries and cultural groups, revealing fascinating insights about global media consumption patterns. Corporate training programs began incorporating lessons learned from the viral handshake into their executive development courses. Major consulting firms like McKinsey and Deloitte created workshops focused on executive presence in the digital age, using footage from the encounter to teach business leaders about the importance of body language and first impressions in an era where any moment could become globally visible within hours. The encounter's impact on diplomatic protocol was subtle but significant. Embassy staff and diplomatic corps around the world received updated training materials that addressed how traditional protocols needed to adapt to constant social media scrutiny. The handshake had demonstrated that even routine diplomatic encounters could become major international stories, requiring more careful consideration of every gesture and interaction. Social media platforms themselves had learned valuable lessons from the phenomenon. Twitter implemented new algorithms designed to identify potentially viral diplomatic content, while Facebook created specialized tools for news organizations to track and analyze political moments as they gained traction. The handshake had essentially become a case study for how digital platforms could better manage viral political content. The fashion industry experienced unexpected benefits from the global attention focused on both men's appearance during the encounter. Trump's navy suit style saw increased sales among business executives seeking to project similar confidence, while Prince William's more traditional British tailoring influenced formal wear trends across Europe. Several major fashion houses credited the handshake with boosting interest in classic diplomatic styling. Mental health professionals noticed lasting effects in their practices as well. The handshake had apparently resonated with many people struggling with social anxiety or confidence issues. Therapists reported that patients frequently referenced the encounter when discussing their own social interactions, using it as a framework for understanding power dynamics and first impressions in their personal and professional lives. Political campaign strategists studied the handshake's viral mechanics intensively, recognizing its potential as a blueprint for creating memorable moments that could influence public perception. The encounter demonstrated how a single, well-executed interaction could generate more positive coverage than months of traditional campaigning. Campaign managers across multiple countries began incorporating handshake coaching into their candidate preparation programs. The entertainment industry took notice as well. Late-night television shows continued to reference the handshake months after it occurred, while comedy writers found that audiences still responded enthusiastically to jokes and sketches based on the encounter. The moment had entered the cultural lexicon in ways that suggested its influence would persist for years to come. International relations think tanks published comprehensive analyses of how the handshake phenomenon had changed public engagement with diplomatic news. The encounter had demonstrated that foreign policy and international relations could capture mainstream attention when presented through compelling visual narratives. This realization influenced how government communications teams approached their messaging strategies. Art galleries and museums began acquiring photographs and related materials from the encounter for their permanent collections. The Smithsonian Institution finalized their acquisition of high-resolution images, while the National Portrait Gallery in London expressed interest in commissioning artwork inspired by the viral moment. Cultural institutions recognized the handshake as a significant artifact of early 21st century political communication. The phenomenon influenced journalism education programs, with many schools adding courses specifically focused on covering viral political moments. The handshake provided perfect material for teaching aspiring journalists about the intersection of traditional reporting and social media analysis. Students learned to balance serious diplomatic coverage with acknowledgement of viral culture's influence on public discourse. Book publishers had commissioned several works analyzing the handshake and its broader implications. 3 major biographies were in development that would examine how both Trump and Prince William handled the aftermath of their viral moment. Publishers recognized that the encounter had become significant enough to warrant serious literary treatment. Technology companies developed new tools for analyzing viral content, using the handshake as their primary testing ground. Artificial intelligence systems were trained to identify potential viral political moments, while social media analytics firms created specialized services for tracking diplomatic encounters and their digital reception. The handshake's influence on popular culture continued to evolve. References appeared in television shows, movies, and books that had no direct connection to politics or diplomacy. The encounter had become a shared cultural reference point that creators could invoke knowing their audiences would understand the implications. Most significantly, the handshake had changed how both men approached similar situations in subsequent public appearances. Trump's team became more strategic about positioning and timing for photo opportunities, while Prince William's handlers paid increased attention to the potential viral implications of routine royal encounters. The moment had educated both camps about the power of visual storytelling in the digital age. Looking back, historians and media analysts agreed that the Trump-William handshake represented a watershed moment in understanding how traditional diplomacy intersected with viral digital culture. The encounter had revealed the immense power of visual narrative to capture global attention and influence public perception in ways that formal diplomatic statements rarely achieved. The handshake's legacy continued to unfold as new viral, political moments were inevitably compared to its unprecedented reach and impact. It had established a new standard for measuring viral diplomatic content and demonstrated that in the digital age, even the most routine political interactions carried the potential to become defining cultural moments that would be remembered and analyzed for generations to come.